Chapter 601, Back to Hong Kong. Let's go check it out, which will help you make a breakthrough, Zhang Han said with enthusiasm. He led the way to the pool of about 50 meters in diameter on the left side of the field. Is it in that pool? Gai Xingkong was surprised. Lieutenant and Wang Zanping followed them. They were not worried at all because there were no other martial artists here and all the treasures belonged to them. They soon arrived at the pool. Gai Xingkong looked carefully at the pool, and then he squatted down to put his hand into the water. He blinked in surprise and told the others, the depth of the pool is more than a few meters. The pool seemed to be only 3 to 5 meters deep, and Gai Xingkong stretched his soul sense as far down as he could. However, when he finally reached a depth of 6 meters, he found that there was still water underneath. The pool is nearly 100 meters deep. It's just a matter of sight. There's a little guy under the water. I'll drag it up, Zhang Han answered, then patted his right hand down and withdrew it. Crash! In the middle of the pool, a fountain-like water column more than 10 meters high burst out. After hearing Zhang Han's words, Gai Xingkong felt his heart beating violently. It is deeper than 100 meters. Now that he is able to scan to a depth of 100 meters, his soul sense must be more than 10 times stronger than mine. Is he a monster? Before he was too shocked, the fountain of water began to spread out, as if something was coming out of the water. Both Lieutenant and Wang Zanping got nervous. This was the first time for them to see such a weird phenomenon. They would not be so nervous if they were in the face of someone's profound skills, witchcraft, and incantation, which were powerful but could be resisted by them with their own blood and spiritual force. After all, there were few martial artists as powerful as Zhang Han, who knew so many amazing incantations. In front of them, the pool, which seemed to be only a few meters in depth, was constantly spouting water. At the same time, the blazing energy and weird chi around them became more and more intense, indicating that their opponents might have reached the Grandmaster late stage. What's that? Flood dragon? Everyone was looking carefully at the pool. Gai Xingkong was preparing to summon his dragon tiger spear. Under everyone's gaze, the pool still looked empty. All of a sudden, something weird happened on the water surface. Clatter! They saw a 1-meter-long pale gold monster, who looked like a goldfish with sharp teeth and dazzling eyes and scales. Such a fish was lifted up by Zhang Han with invisible force. Floating in the air 3 meters above the ground, it constantly shook its tail and wriggled, but could not break free from the force. A fish? Lieutenant was confused. It's just a fish. I expected to see a flood dragon. It's better than a flood dragon. Zhang Han began telling them about the fish. Though this 1-meter-long dragon bone fish hasn't reached the level of Grandmaster, it will grow to be a monster 30 meters in length in the water, which is difficult to be dealt with. It has strong defense, infinite power, and extremely fast speed. Zhang Han only gave a simple explanation. In fact, a mature dragon bone fish could reach innateness last stage, which not only had the advantage of defense, strength, and speed, but also gifted supernatural power. Perhaps one dragon bone fish was not so formidable, but Zhang Han used to see thousands of such fishes in groups, which looked like a tornado. This kind of fish could breed very fast, and Zhang Han intended to bring it back for breeding to add a delicious dish to their dining table. Most importantly, the whole body of a dragon bone fish was a treasure, which could improve martial artists' physical qualities. Will this fish help me make a breakthrough? Gai Xingkong was confused. This fish hasn't reached the Grandmaster level yet. How can it help me to advance to the divine realm? Wang Zanping and Lieutenant dared not to believe it, either. Zhang Han waved his right hand slightly and said, without keeping them guessing, it's not the fish but the pearl in its mouth. The pearl is the core of this land of extreme yang. Pa. With a wave of Zhang Han's right hand, the dragon bone fish suddenly seemed to be slapped. It opened its mouth and spat out a pure white pearl the size of a palm. Seeing the pearl, Zhang Han began scanning it with his soul sense. The pearl glowed as soon as Zhang Han's touched it with his soul sense. As dazzling as the sun, it seemed to make the whole land of extreme Yang tremble at that moment. Kaboom! Then there was a strong wind. Under the explorers' gazes, the golden light and blazing energy surrounding them began to converge into the pearl. The pearl, like a bottomless hole, sucked all the mist in the land of extreme Yang. Later, the area changed from light gold to dark with the pearl as the only light source. "We are standing on a pillar?" Zhang looked around and found that the football field was just the top of a pillar. There seemed to be a huge cave above them, and the abyss below them was filled with billowing magma. "It can help you advance to the divine realm." Zhang Han looked at Gai Xingkong and said, "But I think it's necessary for you to go to Hong Kong with us. If I plant the sunflowers, you will get a wave of chi from the sun." Under the guidance of Zhang Han's fingers, that pearl slowly moved to Gai Xingkong. That dragon bonefish wriggled more fiercely, trying in vain to get back the gold pearl. This. Gai Xingkong wanted to say something after taking the pearl in excitement. But he was not good at saying something in a polite way. When Ltanan was busy organizing his language, Zhang Han said to Ltanan and Wang Zanping, "Let's do a big cleaning." "Okay." Ltanan cheered and began harvesting all kinds of spiritual herbs with Wang Zanping at high speed. Zhang Han smiled at Gai Xingkong, and then rushed toward the sunflower. With a wave of Zhang Han's right hand, the whole sunflower disappeared along with its root. Ltanan and Wang Zanping spent 5 minutes collecting all the spiritual herbs and piling them up. "Han, come to pick some of them, you can plant them in your mountain and make a spiritual farmland for us," said Wang Zanping. "Yes." Ltanan nodded. "I'll take some of them to exchange for those gemstones, you can share the rest." "Thank you for the gold pearl, but I won't take the rest. Just share some of them with those martial artists who gave the gems." Gai Xingkong took only 1/5 of the herbs after thinking carefully about it. Ltanan took 1/5 of them. Wang Zanping put away the remaining half of the herbs and planned to go back and open up a spiritual farmland. "Let's go back." Zhang Han controlled the dragon bone fish to fly upward with him. He could see from a distance the burning door in front of him on the right. It took them nearly an hour to get here and 5 minutes to go back. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 4 figures rushed out of the gate. Upon seeing them, the other people outside the gate were excited. It was dusk now, and the sun shed its last light from the west side of the sky. After Zhang Han and his friends came out, they were soon surrounded by a group of people. "Grandmaster Gai, did you get something there? Grandfather, will you be able to advance to the divine realm this time?" It just turned black and looked like a black hole. It was terrible. "Wow, what's that fish?" When everyone around him was talking, Zhang Han closed the door of flame with his soul sense, which soon disappeared with the remaining energy of all those gems. Then he put the roaring flame saber back into his space ring. Many people envied him for owning such a divine weapon. Zhang Han now has the demon dancing sword, golden armor, a whole set of cards, and the roaring flame saber. He is so rich in treasures. But no one, including Wang Zanping, had seen Zhang Han use a saber, and they didn't know if he could fight with one. "Well, those who have just provided us with gems can choose double value gems among these natural precious materials." Gai Xingkong waved his arms and a pile of spiritual herbs appeared. At the same time, Ltanan also gave some herbs to his subordinates. Many people were surprised. They didn't expect it to be a real wonderful land with so many treasures. After allocating the treasures, Gai Xingkong said, "I'd like to thank everyone for helping me this time. Our business in Linhai is over now, you can go back. I'll go to Hong Kong with them." So the itinerary of everyone was determined. Ltanan's and Gai Xingkong's men would leave tonight, leaving Gai Xingkong and Gai Yulong here to go to Hong Kong with Zhang Han the next day. After making the plan, they went to the other side where there were loungers. Meng Meng ran over to Zhang Han after seeing him, but was soon confused by the fish in his hand. "Papa, that fish is so big. Yes. Zhang Han took a glance at the dragonbone fish and replied, let's bring it back. Okay. After chatting with each other, they got on the yacht one after another. The big 1-meter fish in Zhang Han's hand was quite eye-catching. They had dinner in the dining hall of the Wang family that night, and Rong Chenjiang was depressed after learning that Zhang Han would leave for Hong Kong the next morning. He hadn't consulted Zhang Han about martial arts knowledge yet, which would benefit him a lot as far as Zhang Han's strength was concerned. Rong Chenjiang decided to wait for Jiali to return, while Rong Zhenxing, the patriarch of the Rong family, Rong Zhenmao, Rong Yong, Rong Fan, and Rong Han all came to chat with Zhang Han. Wang Saibai was too afraid to approach him. They talked until 9 o'clock in the evening and then went back to their houses. Zhang Han told the story in a low and soft voice, which made the mother and daughter fall asleep soon. At about 6 o'clock in the morning the next day, Gai Xinggong and Gai Yulong followed Zhang Han to the international airport in Linhai City in the motorcade of the Rong family. The dragonbone fish had been placed in a glass container and carried by Zhao Feng and Elder Meng. Meng had a good time in Linhai and looked forward to returning to Hong Kong. She hadn't played with the two high powers in days. Meng and Xian walked toward the glass container and looked at the fish carefully. Meng murmured, "Big fish, I'll introduce you to Big Hi and Little Hi after we get back. They are very nice." Chapter 602, Delicious Fish. Meng's lovely appearance amused Xian. "The fish doesn't understand your words." Zhang Han was standing on the right side of Xian and talking with Gai Xingkong. Beside him were Rong Chenjiang and some key members of the Rong family who came to see them off. Wang Zanping and others were behind them. Although they were going to take a private plane, they had to cross the airport and go to the hangar on the side of the airport. They went in through the direct door and walked for 2 minutes to get to the plane. There were 3 private planes parked in this area, among which Zhang Han's was the most luxurious. There was a smaller plane on one side of Zhang Han's, and 7 or 8 people were following a young man to the plane in front of them. "Child Lin, we didn't treat you well this time. I thought you could stay a few more days." "Yes, Child Lin, it's too sudden for you to decide to go back. You haven't caught up with the girl in Linhai University, right?" As soon as he finished his words, everyone burst out laughing. The one whom they surrounded was Lin Ji, one of the 4 young masters in Shangjing City. After hearing this, Lin Ji waved his hand. "Are you joking? Look at the front." Swish. They looked up and saw a tall girl in a short dress and black silk stockings standing at the door of the plane, smiling and waving her hand at Lin Ji. Hiss. They were shocked. How could that girl from Linhai University dress in such a sexy way? Didn't she refuse Lin several days ago? Donghu, a little brother of Zhang Han, was now standing beside Lin Ji. He smiled and said, "Brother Lin had a good time with her last night." After Donghu recovered, he shut down his second-hand car shop and worked for Lin Ji, who found that Donghu was not only bad but also declining, but such a guy was suitable to amuse Lin Ji as a clown, so Lin Ji brought him to Linhai this time. Moreover, he knew that Donghu was the kind of person who could give up righteousness for interest. It was funny for Lin Ji to see Donghu give up Liu Feng and come to be his follower. "Child Lin, I admire you so much. I didn't expect that you could do that in 2 days. It's amazing." Several people behind Lin Ji began to flatter him. They really admired Lin Ji because the eldest son of the Ge family was also pursuing that girl at the same time, who didn't appear in these 2 days for whatever reason, leaving such a good chance to Lin Ji. "What issue does Child Lin have to make you go back to Shangjing in such a hurry?" asked a man beside Lin Ji. He had the highest status in this group of people aside from Lin Ji. He knew that Lin Ji had planned to stay in Linhai for half a month but actually spent less than a week here. Lin Ji received 2 calls yesterday and immediately arranged for the plane to leave. Obviously, there was something wrong with him. The man had intended to go to Beijing with him, but he would give up this idea if Lin Ji was too busy. Nothing serious. Lin Ji shook his head. Heavenly Strange's annual auction is about to start. It's said that there are many genuine antiques there, and I plan to go back to have a look and buy some gifts. My second uncle's birthday is coming up. Oh, is it the Heavenly Strange auction? The man with a flat-top haircut was attracted by the news. I don't know if it's inconvenient for Child Lin, but I'd like to go with you. Yes, you're welcome to. Xiao Ma, it's my turn to treat you after we go back to Shangjing. Lin Ji smiled. Well, I'll follow Child Lin to broaden my vision, Ma Liang said with a smile. As one of the candidates for the chairman of a business subsidiary of his family, Ma Liang needed a strong supporter like Lin Ji. Don't be too modest, Xiao Ma, your vision should be broader than mine. As far as your identity is concerned, just go with me to have fun, and take whatever you like in the auction. Lin Ji smiled and walked toward the plane. That sexy girl in high heels came to lean on his shoulder. Lin Ji casually reached out his right hand to hug the woman, and then went up onto the plane with her. Ma Liang was surprised by the girl's attitude. It was true that he couldn't judge a girl by her looks. He turned to say goodbye to other people and walked to the entrance of the plane with Lin Ji and Dong Hu. When Lin Ji approached the entrance of the plane, he saw something weird and said, "Huh? What's wrong, Brother Lin?" Dong Hu turned his gaze in that direction. When he saw the man leading another group of people not far away from them, his face changed, and then he became a little ferocious. That expensive plane is very good. Ma Liang's gaze focused on the plane in that direction. Not the plane, but those guys. Lin Ji frowned and looked at Dong Hu. Was that man Zhang Han just now? What do you mean? Dong Hu was surprised. Because Lin Ji asked whether that man was Zhang Han, instead of whether that man looked like Zhang Han. Zhang Han doesn't deserve to be your servant now. The private plane over there is very expensive, and he couldn't afford to take one. What's more, that man took the lead in getting on the plane. That man may look like Zhang Han, but it can't be him, since there are so many similar people in the world. You are right. Lin Ji laughed. It's a pity that such an arrogant young man becomes so miserable now. Don't sympathize with him, Brother Lin. Zhang Han sold young Master Liu's supercar for several million yuan, which is enough for him to live in a village. Dong Hu smiled. Ha ha. Lin Ji was amused. Ma Liang was curious. Who's Zhang Han? He. Lin Ji slightly narrowed his eyes. He used to be a person hard to deal with for me, but he was too fragile. With that, he put his arm around the shoulder of the tall woman and entered the plane. Dong Hu, Ma Liang, and Lin Ji's bodyguards followed him in. The plane started and slowly lifted off along the runway. Behind them, Zhang Han's plane slowly flew to Hong Kong. They had been traveling these days, and Xian missed that castle, Dai, and Little Hai. She didn't realize that she loved their home so much before. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the plane landed at the airport behind the Meng Meng group. After getting off the plane, they walked to the side parking exit. The Meng Meng group, Meng Meng's recreational restaurant, Purple Moon Entertainment Company, Star Moon Bar. Gai Xingkong was amused. You named them in such a casual way. No. Meng Meng said before the others could answer. Gai Xingkong, Grandfather Gai, they are not casual names. Papa built this restaurant especially for me. Gai Xingkong was surprised and then burst out laughing. Okay, it's my fault. It's true. Wang Ming nodded. Han built this restaurant especially for Meng Meng, and the branch restaurant is for his staff. The entertainment company is for Xian to do business in a more convenient way. Star Moon Bar belongs to Li, an amazing DJ. I see. Gai Xingkong nodded. It's a large company and Han has a talent in business. Zhang Han smiled without saying anything. In fact, he was not good at business at all, but he didn't mind it. When they were talking, Sun Ming and Xiong walked toward them. Happy New Year, boss, madam, Meng Meng, and everyone. Although they had already said Happy New Year on the phone, they still needed to greet each other face to face. They all went to Mount New Moon together in the luxury motorcade. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, Gai Xingkong was surprised again. Does the whole mountain belong to Han? Only Wang Zanping, Wang Zanhong, Gai Yulong, and him were in the car. Yes, the whole mountain. Wang Zanping smiled. Han is powerful and knowledgeable. Our Wang family used to live in Xihang, and Wang Ming is Rong Jiaxin's husband. To our surprise, this relationship brought us a good chance and we all moved here to live a happy life in the mountain with Han as our backbone. If it wasn't for Xuanhuan, we might have been crushed by the mystical fog sect. Wang Zanhong sighed. The mystical fog sect in the eastern suburb of Xihang? Gai Xingkong was surprised. Is Xiang Qishan the sect chief there? Yes, it's Xiang Qishan. The mystical fog sect majors in formation and Xiang Qishan is said to be good in this field. Gai Xingkong nodded, but he was defeated by Han. Wang Zanping smiled. Han has reached the highest level in the field of formations, which can't be understood by me or Xiang Qishan. Gai Xingkong was stunned. I knew that Han was good at them according to the formation he made in Jinshaw Island, but he seems to be more powerful than I expected. Not only that, Brother Gai, you will find that what you know is just the tip of the iceberg after talking with him. Wang Zanping shook his head and sighed. Gai Yulong also sighed along with him. Zhang Han's present strength was far from what he could achieve, and that was just the tip of the iceberg, which was a little scary. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. The motorcade line passed through the tall stone gate and went up, stopping directly in the parking lot on the left side of the restaurant. After getting out, Zhang Han and his friends walked into the restaurant one after another. Zhao Feng, Ahu, and Liu Jiren, who followed them, took the fish tank with the dragon bone fish in it to the back mountain and put the fish into the pond. The dragon bone fish began swimming happily in the pond and sometimes would jump out of the water. Even Dai and Little Hai were attracted by it when it was eating the other fishes in the pond. What's this, Brother Gai? Just enjoyed the dishes here. I'm sure they are more delicious than all the food you have had before. Wang Zanping smiled at Gai Xingkong before entering the restaurant. You're exaggerating. Gai Xinglong laughed. Delicious food can't attract me. However, when he took the first bite, he was stunned. Then he began to eat as fast as he could. While Zhang Han and his friends were enjoying the food, some of the guests wandering in the mountain detected a fragrance in the air, which didn't come from the restaurant. What is it? It smells so good. Boss is having lunch in the restaurant, but this smell is not the same as before. It's like the smell of grilled fish. A half of a fish about 1 meter in length was lying peacefully on a shelf next to a boulder in the back mountain forest. The fish had been roasted. Dai and Little Hai had divided the other half of its body and were eating happily. While eating, they sometimes chatted with their eyes. What a delicious fish! Chapter 603, Just a Beginning. In the dining hall of Cold Immortal School, its decoration and layout were very beautiful and magnificent. The dining hall had a moderate area and a high ceiling. There were several load-bearing columns inside, which looked like upward flying dragons. There were also various decorations on the ceiling, including several decorative lights echoing each other from afar. There was no screen between the dining tables, and the chairs and tables were specially customized. The most distinctive feature of the hall was the 3 complete pieces of floor-to-ceiling glass, which surprised the workers who had brought the furniture here. There was no doubt that it was very comfortable to eat here. At the same time, there were 50 members in the restaurant. In addition to a relatively small number of Zhang Han's family members, the other guests included Luo Chengwin of the Luo family, Luo Shan, chairman of Saint Kindergarten, the patriarch of the Chu family, and various well-known rich businessmen in Hong Kong. Both Fu Hongshan and Tang Jie drew lots and bought a member card. It was lunchtime, and many members were eating at the side table. In the beginning, they all sat alone at the restaurant. Gradually, they gathered together and chatted during lunchtime, and someone even took a picture of the restaurant. Many people joked that Hong Kong's business circle would be backward for 10 years if a bomb was dropped during lunchtime in this restaurant. There were so many celebrities in the restaurant. including those from the current 3 top families. The 4th family had already been destroyed by Zhang Han. There were still some bottles of red wine sent by Liu Qingfeng in the restaurant, but all the guests here were so rich that they continued to turn to a liquor cabinet that was filled with classic treasured liquor. This liquor cabinet with hundreds of bottles of wine had become the feature of this restaurant. Everyone could get the wine for free, but later they would fill the original vacancy with new wine without having a name on it, which was very interesting for them. Everyone in the restaurant saluted Zhang Han after seeing him, but they didn't bother him since he was treating his friends. Suddenly, someone in the crowd shouted, "Grandmaster Gai, North Tiger Gai Xing Kong?" His words shocked the other customers. Why has North Tiger Gai Xing Kong come to Hong Kong? He seems to be familiar with Grandmaster Zhang. It's shocking. They were even more confused at Gai Xing Kong's respect toward Zhang Han. How amazing Mr. Zhang is. However, when they saw that Gai Xing Kong had eaten the first bite of food and then silently accelerated his speed, they all laughed silently. However powerful Gai Xing Kong was, and he was conquered by the delicacy. Eating and chatting, everyone had a good lunch time. "Papa, I'm full." Meng Meng finished eating, took a glass of apple juice, and sipped it. At the same time, she looked at Zhang Han and Xian eagerly. Obviously, Meng Meng wanted to play with Dai and Little Hai. But there were so many adults in the restaurant and Meng Meng had to wait for her parents' approval patiently. This was due to Xian's good education. Though Meng Meng was patient, Zhang Han didn't want her to wait for a long time. 1 minute later, seeing Xian put down her chopsticks and wipe her lips with a towel, Zhang Han said, "Enjoy your lunch, we are going to the back mountain." Wow! Meng Meng put down her juice bottle and looked at Zhang Han happily. "Don't spoil her." Xian smiled and then said to the other guests, "Have a good time here, Uncle Gai and Master Wang. We'll take Meng Meng to find Dai and Little Hai in the back mountain. I'll go with you." Zhang Li put down her chopsticks. "Me too." Zif finished her last piece of chicken, gave a contented burp, and then put down her chopsticks. "I'm full, too." Gai Xing Kong smiled and said, "It's the most delicious meal I've ever had." Most of the people at the table stood up and went out. They walked slowly because they had just finished their meal. Meng Meng was running happily forward. The castle is very artistic. When they passed by the castle, Gai Xing Kong shook his head and sighed. Then he was shocked by the tall trees at the back. "This tree is unique." Ha ha ha. Wang Zanping burst out laughing. "It is not just unique." "Really?" Gai Xing Kong was surprised to learn that this unique tree was a divine object. Walking toward the Thunder Yang tree and overlooking the whole Mount New Moon, Gai Xing Kong sighed again. Such a large area is really good. The orchard, livestock, pets, fish pond, and the residential area in Shan make up a town that can be totally self-sufficient. Meng Meng ignored them and kept running forward with her short legs. She cheered while running, "Big Hai Hai, Little Hai Hai, I am back." Zhang Han sniffed the air and smelled a faint fragrance. He stared at the pond for 3 seconds and then looked in the direction of the dense forest. Dai and Little Hai jumped out of the forest quickly, but they were burping at the same time. After seeing Zhang Han, Dai felt guilty and dared not meet his eyes. Obviously, it had done something wrong. Little Hai, who was more of a brother than Dai, ran toward Meng Meng and jumped happily. Zhang Han's lips twitched. "I've just brought the dragon bone fish back. How dare you eat it?" Originally, Zhang Han planned to breed dragon bone fish and make them into a future delicacy. At the same time, they could be cultivated as the overlord in the sea. That's how it all boiled down. When Zhao Feng put the dragon bone fish in the fish pond, he forgot to warn Dai and Little Hai, thinking that they always behaved themselves and wouldn't eat the fish. However, the dragon bone fish began to make troubles as soon as Zhao Feng left. Pit-a-pat, pit-a-pat. It jumped out of the water, shuttled around the pond, and soon ate a big fish. The 1-meter-long fish was the largest one in the pond, who preferred to bite one fish at a time and throw it 5 meters out of the water. Then the dragonbone fish would jump out from below and eat that fish. The dragonbone fish in the water was very free. However, its action drew Dai's and Little Hi's attention. Whoa, 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 what's this? Ow, I don't know. Ooh. It is eating our fishes. Ow, I see it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It is so arrogant. Brother, let's kill it. Oh. Little Hi narrowed its eyes, called twice in a low voice, arched itself, and then approached the pond step by step. Ooh. Hurry up. What are you waiting for? Under Dai's notice. Whoosh. After seeing a fish thrown out of the water again, Little Hi moved quickly in that direction. The dragonbone fish was about to jump out of the water when it saw an approaching mouth with sharp teeth. It was going to be bitten. The dragonbone fish had just escaped from Zhang Han and was about to live a free life in the water. However, it had just eaten 8 fishes before it was bitten by Little Hi. Plop. It was the end of its life. Little Hi was as fast as lightning. After killing the dragonbone fish with one bite, it returned to the land and ran toward Dai with the fish in its mouth. Wow! Dai hesitated. Ow! This fish looks fat, shall we bake it? Soon, there was a smell in the dense forest of the back mountain. Of course! The meat quality of the dragonbone fish, which was close to the Grandmaster stage, was very good. Coupled with its unique kind of nutrition, it could be defined as a tonic dish. Zhang Han kept scanning Dai and Little Hi with his soul sense. He felt that Dai's chi and blood were surging and growing rapidly. It could be imagined that Dai's strength of defense would soon increase a lot, and Little Hi's skeleton would also change a little, making its cultivating speed faster. Zhang Han knew that Little Hi could soon acquire the same speed as him after breaking 3 to 5 levels, and it would be faster than sound. Sensing Zhang Han's gaze, Little Hi, who had just approached Meng, turned to run toward Zhang Han. Then it squatted on the ground, wagged its big tail, and spat its tongue at Zhang Han. Its clear eyes shone the joy of seeing its master. As for Dai, it ran toward Meng, put the little girl on its shoulder, and then went to sit in front of Zhang Han. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Dai pointed at the pond and tried to give Zhang Han an explanation. We ate it because it kept making troubles. Zhao Feng looked at them and then was stunned at the truth. He couldn't help thinking about it in astonishment. The two high powers are so powerful, they have just eaten that valuable fish. Zhang Han was amused. He waved his hand and said, just go to have fun. Oh, hum. Dai was relieved and ran to the pet area in the back mountain while tossing and catching Meng in its arms. Little Hi was cheering in its way and bouncing around Dai. Let's go ahead and sit for a while. Zhang Han looked at Meng and said with a light smile. However, when they walked forward, they found that Gai Xingkong did not move. His facial muscles were stiff and he was staring at Dai and Little Hi in shock. What's wrong with you, grandfather? Gai Yulong was confused. Gai Xingkong did not answer him, but kept looking at Dai and Little Hi. After a while, he turned around and forced a smile at Zhang Han. If I'm right, both of them are spirit beasts at the Grandmaster stage? Yes. Zhang Han nodded. Gai Xingkong couldn't help sighing with relief. Han, your cold immortal school is amazing. Ha ha. Wang Zanping laughed and said, don't worry, this is just the beginning. You will soon be astonished. Chapter 604, Good luck? Just the beginning? Gai Xingkong knew what Wang Zanping wanted to say, so he smiled and said, okay, I'll wait for your surprise. Uncle Gai, come here and sit down. Hey, Xiaofeng, please call someone to send some fruit here, Ziyan said with a smile. After Zhang Han's transformation, the former canopy had been removed and replaced by some stone pavilions. The terrain of the pavilions was slightly higher, and there were about 10 pavilions in the whole back mountain and a row of pavilions in the water pond so people could fish. The pavilions were of different sizes. and the group of guests chose a relatively large one. There were a rectangular stone table and chairs made of warm stones in the pavilion, and they didn't feel cold or wet when sitting on them. If the stone chairs were cold like normal and made people suffer from hemorrhoids after sitting on them for a long time, cold and mortal school would become a joke. Zhao Feng went to pick the fruits himself instead of calling others for help. When he walked to the orchard, he met Ah Hu and Liu Jiren. Liu Jiren was still on holiday, so she was willing to travel to Hong Kong with Ah Hu. Liu Qingfeng was reluctant at first, but his daughter was an adult now and he couldn't control her. He trusted Ah Hu's character and knew that Ah Hu would obey Zhang Han and would not eat forbidden fruit before he was engaged to Liu Jiren. After several days of observation, Liu Qingfeng agreed that Liu Jiren could go to Hong Kong with Ah Hu. Liu Jiren was curious about everything in Cold Immortal School. What beautiful houses! What beautiful flowers! What a tall tree! The castle is really impressive. The boss is rich. There are so many pets. They are beautiful. Oh, isn't that a gorilla, so big? Liu Jiren kept cheering all the way. Then they met Zhao Feng and went to the orchard to pick fruit with him. Seeing all kinds of fruit trees and beautiful fruits, Liu Jiren couldn't control her saliva. Seeing the couple kissing behind him, Zhao Feng decided not to disturb them. He picked a batch of fruits and then left in a hurry. He washed the fruit and sent it to the pavilion. Then he went to the people who had just finished lunch and came to visit the back mountain. Menkai, shall we have a walk there? Zhao Feng looked at the girl and said excitedly, I won't go to the woods with you. Liang Menkai and Liang Hao went to Zhang Han's pavilion to chat with Zhang Li. Zhao Feng followed them back to the pavilion. Others also went to other pavilions to see the scenery and enjoy their leisure time after lunch. They preferred to watch Meng playing with Dai and Little Hai. The back mountain was now full of vitality with Meng here. In her absence, Dai would sleep all day and Little Hai didn't want to come out for a walk. It was obvious that when Zhang Han and his family were away, Dai and Little Hai had no motivation to do anything. Only at the time of every meal could the smoke from the forest be seen. Han, you have a treasure land. Gai Xingkong looked around and said with a smile, I'm looking forward to seeing Wang Yu's and Jiali's expressions when they come back. Every time he talked about Zhang Wangyu, Gai Xingkong had a unique smile on his face. Although Zhang Han was very powerful, he was from the younger generation of Gai Xingkong and couldn't be treated as a brother. Brother Gai, try the apples here. Wang Zanping gave a red apple to him with a smile. No thank you, I don't eat much fruit, and I'm not interested in it. Gai Xingkong waved his hand casually. Then you should give it a try. Try it, Wang Zanping said with a smile. This, all right. Gai Xingkong took the fruit out of politeness. After taking a bite of it, he couldn't help saying loudly, wow, it's delicious. He ate a whole apple in a few bites. Gai Yulong was stunned. My grandfather seldom eats fruit, let alone apples. Han, the fruits here are special. Gai Xingkong looked at the orchard and then the other places, trying to find something. He realized that the food here was delicious and the fruits were so fragrant. What does it mean? There must be something special here. There had to be some natural precious materials here, but he didn't see anything strange around. He even didn't notice the fragrant grass a few meters away. Zhang Han grinned after hearing Gai Xingkong's comment. You'll know it later. Even Ziyan covered her mouth and smiled, because she saw Gai Xingkong reaching for the fruit basket and taking an apple. Who just said that he never eats fruit? My husband is powerful in every aspect. Ziyan looked at Zhang Han with love and adoration in her eyes. Their romance made several people nearby feel a current around them. Whoa, for many years, the love between this couple was still very touching. Gai Yulong was the only one sitting silently near them without making any comments. He focused on the fruit basket and wondered if they were really so delicious. So he grabbed an apple and took a bite, which was crisp and sweet. It turned out that apples could be so delicious. Gai Yulong began eating fruit while listening to them chatting. Although it was not the Lantern Festival yet, the New Year's atmosphere had almost dissipated, especially for martial artists. The Spring Festival was not so important. After sitting for half an hour, Zhang Han looked at Meng Meng in front of him and found that she intended to play the whole afternoon. After thinking about it, Zhang Han prepared to take care of his own business. "Uncle Gai, let's go." Zhang Han stood up and said. "Are you going to do something?" Xian asked. "Yes." Zhang Han nodded. "I'll be back in an hour." "Well, then I'll play with Meng Meng," Xian responded. All the guests here were divided into two groups. Xian, Zif, Zhang Li, Liang Hao, Liang Menkai, and Zhao Feng went to the pet area. Zhang Han, Wang Zanping, and Wang Ming went to the Thunder Yang tree. "Shall I get started?" Gai Xingkong asked when he saw Zhang Han stop. "Wait for me," Zhang Han replied. He stood with his back to the Thunder Yang tree and closed his eyes. He fell into silence after saying this, leaving others in confusion. What is he doing? Under everyone's gaze, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes passed. When they were patient enough to wait for the 11th minute, Zhang Han suddenly took a step forward and appeared 5 meters away. Crash! The whole Thunder Yang tree was trembling. With the second step, Zhang Han walked forward 4 meters. The Thunder Yang tree trembled again. After Zhang Han took his third step, the leaves of the Thunder Yang tree began shaking. Gai Xingkong's face suddenly changed. A divine object. He looked up at the Thunder Yang tree. To his surprise, such a tall tree was a divine object. After Zhang Han took his fourth step, whoosh! A light wind was generated nearby and shocked Gai Xingkong. He found that the whole green grassland was also a treasure. After Zhang Han took his fifth step, the more Gai Xingkong sensed, the stiffer his face became. It turns out, this is a real treasure land. The mountains and fields were full of natural precious materials, which was amazing. When Zhang Han finished his fifth step, he opened a pair of shining eyes. Flowers fall off. Zhang Han stretched out his right hand forward and summoned the sunflower. The flower was shining in the air 5 meters above the ground, slowly falling down. When the sunflower appeared, all the plants and trees in the whole territory seemed to be activated. Gai Xingkong, who was close to the divine realm, also sensed the amazing qi. Buzz! The moment the sunflower fell, an invisible wave covered the whole territory. Yang qi began to spread out. Woo! Zhang Han gulped and stepped back to feel the sunflower. He was waiting for an opportunity for Gai Xingkong to advance to the higher level. 3 seconds after the sunflower fell. Bang! The Thunder Yang tree shuddered suddenly, and then there were beams of blue light converging toward the sunflower. Huh? Zhang Han was surprised as he didn't know what it was. Is the quality of the sunflower lower than I judged? Is the Thunder Yang tree unwilling to accept foreign things? I don't think I've been blinded. But the changes that happened in the next moment shocked Zhang Han, who soon became overjoyed. What he said confused the others. It's not a sunflower. The sunflower changed along with Zhang Han's words. With the concentration of the essence energy of the Thunder Yang tree, the pure white petals of sunflower suddenly vibrated slightly. Clatter, clatter, clatter. One after another, crackles came from the flowers and the white petals fell, just like it was paint falling off an antique. After the white material covering them disappeared, the petals and stems changed into a surprising color. It was not a sunflower. It was a Thunder Yang flower, which was much more valuable than a sunflower. How lucky Zhang Han was. Looking at the crystal blue Thunder Yang flower, Zhang Han smiled. The Thunder Yang flower's nourishing effect on the territory was much better than that of a sunflower. Most importantly, Zhang Han had a Thunder Yang tree. With the help of the Thunder Yang flower, the time for the production of Thunder Yang wood could be greatly shortened. While the Thunder Yang tree was related to the wood element, the Thunder Yang flower was related to the fire element. If Zhang Han could get Thunder Yang grass with the water element, Thunder Yang crystal with the metal element, and Thunder Yang sand with the soil element, he would gather all the 5 elements and turn the whole territory into a land of Thunder Yang, which was a real treasure land. The lifespan of ordinary people living in a land of Thunder Yang could be more than 300 years. Among them, a Thunder Yang flower, as a Thunder Yang treasure, was the most difficult to be found. He didn't expect that this presumed sunflower was actually a hidden Thunder Yang flower. Zhang Han sighed with relief because only Saint Warrior Planet had so many spirit treasures. Let's start. Looking at the Thunder Yang flower with surging energy, Zhang Han nodded at Gai Xingkong. It was time for Gai Xingkong to make a breakthrough. Chapter 605, Divine Realm. Gai Xingkong looked serious now. Hiss. Woo. Gai Xingkong took 3 deep breaths to calm himself down, and then he took 2 steps forward to sit cross-legged on the grass. When he closed his eyes, a golden pearl suddenly appeared in his hand. As soon as golden fog of extreme yang and other energy gushed out of the pearl, Zhang Han's eyes lit up. He controlled all the energies in his territory to converge onto Gai Xingkong. All of a sudden, a hurricane appeared around Gai Xingkong. Clatter. Everyone could hear it clearly. A pale golden storm covered Gai Xingkong. At the same time, half of the Thunder Yang flower's energy had gathered in the golden pearl in Gai Xingkong's hand. The rest of the energy was transformed into thousands of stars, and then fell down onto the whole territory like a meteor shower. The color of the pleasant-smelling grass was brighter, the land was more fertile, and all the ponds, fish ponds, and planting areas were being improved. All these changes could only be sensed by soul sense. Most of the people present, except for Wang Zanping, Wang Zanhong, and Wang Zanzong, who were going to the back mountain, did not sense this change. The 3 of them felt that the whole cold immortal school was changing. They did not know what it meant. Zhang Han was the only one who knew what was happening. Everything was being promoted, from the crystal vein at the bottom of the mountain to the spirit water in the cave, and then to the surface. This was a comprehensive promotion brought by these 2 kinds of Thunder Yang spirit treasures. Both the Thunder Yang tree and Thunder Yang flower were related to the 5 elements. If Zhang Han managed to gather all 5 elements in the future, the cold immortal school would be turned into a fairy palace on a treasure land. Zhang Han sensed all these changes and his face slightly changed. Master Wang, give me those spiritual herbs. Okay. Wang Zanping summoned his mountains and rivers flag and took all the spiritual herbs out. Zhang Han took a glance at one side of the Thunder Yang tree. With a wave of his hand, the pleasant-smelling grass in the front came out of the ground and moved to other places. Then he planted the spiritual herbs and surrounded them with holly trees, making the piece of land a medicinal field. It should be able to burst out a wave of energy. Thunder Yang flower. Zhang Han took a look at the Thunder Yang flower. In this way, the Thunder Yang flower could maintain its best condition and nourish the territory every day. Zhang Han wanted to improve the quality of the spiritual herbs in the medicine field because what he had now was far from useful. If the 5 third-level herbs could be upgraded to the 4th level, and more than 50 second-level spiritual treasures could be upgraded to the 3rd level, he could refine spiritual pills with them. A spiritual pill could help to improve the spiritual force of the security group members, who would soon advance to a higher level. Zhang Han's 5 generals might be able to advance to the Grand Master level with the pill. However, this required the Thunder Yang flower to pay a relatively large price, that is, half of its essence. The Thunder Yang flower nourishes not only the territory, but also the other 4 spirit treasures as the most powerful spirit treasure of the Thunder Yang series. Although the Thunder Yang flower is slightly damaged, it will also be restored by the Thunder Yang tree over time. I can give it a try. Zhang Han thought about it and made up his mind. There were more than 20 third-level spiritual herbs in the center of the whole field, but there were only 5 kinds that Zhang Han wanted to upgrade, 3 of which were very close to the 4th level. Zhang Han was still not absolutely sure, so he decided to give it a try. If he couldn't improve them all, he could upgrade 3 of them. With a wave of Zhang Han's hand, the Thunder Yang tree suddenly released a lot of energy that could be felt by Wang Zanping. It gathered on the Thunder Yang flower and made the latter spew out a stream of hot energy. which landed on the medicine field. Crash! All the spiritual herbs in the whole field vibrated. 5 minutes later, Zhang Han got a satisfying result. All 5 spiritual herbs were upgraded to the 4th level, and 90% of the 2nd level herbs he needed were upgraded to the 3rd level. Then the energy dissipated, and the color of Thunder Yang flower was much dimmer. The 5 spiritual herbs newly promoted to the 4th level sent out a stream of energy, which was absorbed by the Thunder Yang flower, making it recover a little. Why? Zhang Han felt surprised. The quality of the Thunder Yang flower is higher than I thought. Wang Zanping was shocked by everything happening here. Han, am I hallucinating? There seems to be something wrong there, Wang Zanping said in confusion. Yes, it's weird. Zhang Han nodded. Gaik Xingkong was sitting not far away from them. The golden light had formed a cocoon that trapped him up. This showed that Gaik Xingkong's cultivation had entered a stable stage, but he still needed 5 hours to a day to make a breakthrough. Zhang Han walked to the pet area in the back mountain after saying this. Wang Zanping, Wang Zanhong, and Wang Zanzong looked at each other and then went to the front of the medicine field. They couldn't help exclaiming, "Are they upgraded? Wow, so many holy objects. It's so weird and amazing." Zhang Han ignored their exclamations and went straight to the pet area. He felt that both Dai and Little Hai, who were playing, had been promoted. Thanks to the dragon bone fish, Dai's chi and blood had increased by 20%, and Little Hai's bones became harder. But the fish didn't help them in cultivation, and they were still some distance away from the Grand Master middle stage. These two guys were playing happily around Meng Meng. Meng Meng ran and jumped when she was not tired, and then took a rest on the shoulder of Dai. Xian and the others were sitting in a pavilion on the edge of the pet area. Seeing Zhang Han coming, Zhang Li said with a smile, "Brother, would you like to play Mahjong with us?" Mahjong? Zhang Han was surprised. He hadn't heard that word in a long time. Before Zhang Han answered, Zhang Li said, "I'll play with my sister-in-law, Meng Kai, and Fei Fei. You can sit aside and give my sister-in-law advice. I have no choice." Zhang Han was amused by Zhang Li. They had already arranged everything well. "Yes, I'm just being polite." Zhang Li smiled mischievously. "Come on, I'll watch you play." Zhang Han nodded his head. Then they moved to the small table nearby, and Zhao Feng soon came back with a Mahjong machine. Although there was no Mahjong machine in the castle, there were other people who liked to play it, including many girls of the Wang family. After the Mahjong machine and chairs were arranged, Zhao Feng sat behind Liang Mengkai, Liang Hao sat beside Zhang Li, and Zhang Han sat beside Xian. "Ahem, brother, you are not allowed to cheat." Just before they started, Zhang Li looked at Zhang Han and warned him. "Yes, brother-in-law, you can't cheat, otherwise the game will be boring. Sister Yan's skill in playing Mahjong is not good, and we all want to win her money." Zhou agreed. "Who's not good at it?" Xian took a glance at her. "Not me. I'm not familiar with your Mahjong rules. Could you please explain them to me?" Liang Mengkai said. "Well, I'll introduce it first, and then you can make a supplement." The three girls began talking about the rules, leaving Xian sitting quietly beside them, holding Zhang Han's hand. After a while, another problem arose. "How much is our bet?" The girls checked their wallets and suggested, "Is 100 yuan okay?" "Okay." The game started. Zhang Han, Zhao Feng, and Liang Hao watched the game casually. After a while, Meng Meng came over to sit in Zhang Han's arms for a while, and then ran out to play. This was how they spent their afternoon at leisure. In the evening, Meng Meng was stunned when she passed the Thunder Yang tree on her way back to the castle. "Papa, how can there be such a big egg there?" she asked, pointing confusedly in the direction of Gaik Xingkong. Zhang Han pondered and replied, "It's an ornament, it's for viewing." "Well, is there anything in it?" Meng Meng asked again. She thought it was a golden egg that could be smashed. "Nothing is inside it," It will be taken away tomorrow, Zhang Han replied. He took Meng Meng back to their castle. Zhang Han and his family had hot pot for dinner in the dining hall on the 5th floor of the cylindrical building. After dinner, they watched TV for a while, until it was past 9 o'clock. They went back to their big bed in the bedroom on the 3rd floor. Xian jumped on the bed and lay down. Being at home is the most comfortable. Meng Meng ran forward a few steps, went to the bedside, took off her slippers, climbed onto the bed, stood up, and then fell on the bed like Mama, cheering. Being at home is the most comfortable. Meng Meng sat up again. Mama, shall we play with toys for a while? It's almost 10 o'clock now, we should change into our pajamas, listen to Papa's story, and then go to sleep. Xian reached out and scratched the tip of Meng Meng's small nose. Well, all right, change into pajamas, listen to a story, and go to sleep. While Xian and Meng Meng changed into their pajama outfits, Zhang Han took off his coat, got in bed in boxer shorts, and lay in the middle. Xian was on the right and Meng Meng was on the left. It was story time. Where did we stop last time? The king of dwarves met the big shark and wanted to fight it. The dwarfs must not be eaten. Meng Meng mumbled, right. Zhang Han smiled. Meng Meng remembered it clearly. Zhang Han began to tell the story, and the mother and daughter fell asleep soon. In general, Xian would go to bed late, but she had been flying all morning and playing mahjong all afternoon today, which made her a little tired, so she fell asleep quickly. Zhang Han also lay on the bed with peace of mind and closed his eyes to rest. It was a quiet night. At 6:30 the next morning, buzz, an extremely fine hum was heard all over Mount New Moon, followed by a breeze. If all the martial artists here scanned it with their soul sense, they would find that this was an energy storm. Just at this moment, Dai and Little Hai suddenly stood up and turned their gazes to the Thunder Yang tree, because they felt that there was a terrible thing waking up. Chapter 606, List of Dangerous People. In the Wang family's area in Cold Immortal School, both Wang Zanping and Wang Zanzong opened their eyes along with Wang Zanhong and Wang Ming, who were practicing the 100 formation image in the back mountain. Gai Yulong, who was resting in a room in the villa, also noticed the abnormality. All those above the level of Wu Dao Grandmaster felt the overwhelming atmosphere. He managed it. All of them rushed toward the Thunder Yang tree on the mountain top. Zhang Han, of course, was the first to feel it. He moved his body gently, got out of bed, put on his clothes without hesitation, and then jumped down the balcony to the Thunder Yang tree. It was like the center of a storm. Ooh! The two high powers were not afraid at all with Zhang Han by their side. Dai even stretched out its head and stared at the golden egg in front of it, shouting, ooh, 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 ooh. Dai pointed to Little Hai as it barked. Brother, the weird egg is making trouble here, shall we destroy it? Oh. Little Hai arched its body, stared at the egg, and roared in a low voice. It was challenging the egg. Ow! Worrying that Little Hai couldn't defeat the egg, Dai smashed its two big fists on its chest. Zhang Han was amused by them. Behave yourself, or you will be beaten later. Don't blame me for not reminding you, Zhang Han said. Woo! Dai's expression froze, then it scratched its head, sat on the ground with a smile, and secretly exhaled a long breath. I can't beat that egg, otherwise, I'll be beaten. Then Dai found Little Hai also sitting on the ground. It just seemed to be acting. The chi in front of them was more and more terrible. He has made a breakthrough. Wang Zanping narrowed his eyes and murmured with envy, Divine Realm. The Divine Realm was the level that every martial arts master pursued. After stepping into the Divine Realm, they would get a chance to advance to the Earth Realm and even the Heaven Realm. Then they would become the top master in the world, including the worldlet. Not bad. Zhang Han watched for a while, and finally nodded his head. Judging from the chi of Gai Xingkong, it was a quite satisfying breakthrough. Clatter. The hurricane near the golden egg was getting stronger and stronger. shaking the thunder yang tree's branchlets. The most nervous and excited person was Gai Yulong. Under his gaze, all of a sudden, the golden egg turned into a golden light, and gradually faded in the wind, revealing the figure of people sitting cross-legged inside. Gai Xingkong looked younger than before, his face was calm and he seemed to fall into a deep sleep. Suddenly, he opened his eyes, which were shining. At this time, the spirit storm had come to its end. After the last energy was absorbed by Gai Xingkong, he stood up. Several thundery sounds came from his body. Woo! Gai Xingkong exhaled the turbid qi and then made an obeisance toward Zhang Han. Han, I owe you a favor. It's nothing, it's for my father's sake. Zhang Han waved his hand. Gai Xingkong didn't know how to reply to Zhang Han, the honest young man. Now, I feel good. Gai Xingkong closed his eyes. Everything in the world can be seen more clearly, including the plants, trees, flowers, stones, etc. This feeling of controlling everything is very wonderful. I used to think that I was very close to the divine realm, but after the breakthrough, I realized that I was far from this level at that time. Han, it's amazing for you to kill Gudong Glai at such level. Sometimes, levels don't mean everything, like this. When Zhang Han was speaking, his soul sense suddenly rushed at Gai Xingkong. Gai Xingkong immediately sensed it and then began fighting against it with his newborn soul sense. Gai Xingkong was soon defeated. Now he was depressed. You have a big secret, Han. Gai Xingkong forced to smile. He just felt that in the divine realm, his spiritual power had been sublimated and he had the newly born spirit. The spiritual sense mind trick could strengthen his moves and attacking effect. But he didn't know that he actually knew little about soul sense. Congratulations, grandfather, you have reached the divine realm. Gai Yulong cheered in excitement. Congratulations, Grandmaster Gai. No, we should call you Immortal Gai now. Wang Zanping smiled. They all congratulated Gai Xingkong. Gai Xingkong shook his head and looked at Zhang Han. Shall we have a fight? Forget it. Zhang Han looked up to the third floor of the castle and said, I have to cook. Whoosh. Zhang Han moved quickly to a balcony on the third floor. All right. Gai Xingkong looked at Wang Zanping and others, and said in a chilling way, would you like to have a fight? At first, no one agreed, but then they learned that Gai Xingkong wanted to vent his surging energy, because he could not control it well. So they went to the sea not far away, and had a fight in the shallow water area. About an hour later, they went back to the big restaurant. Gai Xingkong looks very energetic, while the others were a little embarrassed. Zhang Han and his family were having breakfast in the castle's dining hall. They had various types of food in Cold Immortal School, but their breakfast was as simple as usual. Papa, Mama, I miss Yihan, Martin, Moon, and Stephen. Can I invite them over? Meng asked after breakfast. After a half semester of kindergarten, she gradually liked to play with her peers. Well, it's a little rushed. Ziyan shook her head slightly. During the winter vacation, Wang Yihan would probably be in Hong Kong, but the others might be on holiday elsewhere. Just ask them, Zhang Han replied. Okay. Ziyan also planned to ask. If they didn't have time today, she would make an appointment next time, so she took out her mobile phone, found the parents of Meng's friends in the WeChat group, and sent messages to them one by one. Hello, I am. After sending out all the messages, ding, the fastest reply was made by Suyu, Wang Yihan's mother, but the voice on the phone was Wang Yihan's. Oh, I miss Meng too, auntie, wait a minute. I'll go there in a moment. The other messages also were replied to. Stephen had returned to England and Martin had returned to Africa. Only Li Moon and Wang Yihan, who lived here, could come over soon. Meng was happy to wait for them. She asked Mama to braid her hair into 2 beautiful braids. At about 10 o'clock in the morning, Wang Jian drove a Bentley to the castle. They had come over the mountain and had dinner in the big restaurant. But it was the first time for them to enter the castle. They were stunned at Zhang Han's strength after seeing the inside of the castle. In terms of territory and architecture, Mount New Moon was bigger than that of any of the three families of Hong Kong. Yihan, Meng. The two girls met happily with each other there. After they played for a while, Li Mun came to the castle. This time, her father, who was engaged in the real estate industry, felt that his calf muscles were shaking. He worked in the industry and knew how valuable the land and the houses were. What's the background of Mr. Zhang? When he was hesitating, he found that Mr. Zhang was treating them in the same warm and gentle way as the last time, which made him admire Zhang Han more. Meng, Wang Yihan, and Li Mun played in the castle for a while. After lunch, they went to the pet area in the back mountain to play with Dai and Little Hai. Seeing that Xian was politely receiving the guests, Zhang Han sat for a while and then went to refine medicinal pellets. Happy times are always too short. Meng's friends played with her all day and left after dinner. Gai Xingkong was ready to go the next day. In the afternoon, he couldn't help feeling astonished and praising Zhang Han secretly when he saw Zhang Han's alchemy skill. In the early morning of the next day, Zhang Han asked Zhao Feng to arrange all the members of the security group to have 24-hour continuous training on the beach. The training lasted 72 hours. After 3 days and nights, these members were all exhausted. Zhang Han took out a large number of medicinal pellets for them to take, and then they began to make continuous breakthroughs. The 5 generals in the security group, namely Zhao Feng, Hu, Xuyong, Instructor Liu, and Elder Meng, had all reached the Wudao Grand Master stage along with Leng Yi. 70% of the other members reached the Heaven stage, and 30% of them were now Earth stage masters. They couldn't even imagine it before. However, the breakthrough did not mean the end, but a new beginning. Everyone here was taught by Zhang Han respectively and started a new round of cultivation. In order to refine their medicinal pellets, Zhang Han used most of the herbs in the field. But when he clicked on the Safety Force Center app, he found that his score was nearly 150,000. These guys are really working hard. Zhang Han smiled, clicked on the treasure house, and bought a large number of spiritual herbs. Zhang Han's herbs were efficiently delivered to Mount New Moon in an hour. The newly planted second-level herbs were only enough to fill half of the medicine field. But Zhang Han was sure that they would become available spirit treasures one day. At 6 o'clock in the afternoon, after dinner, news began spreading in all the national security agencies of Hua Nation, which soon was heard by the martial arts world. The list of dangerous people in Hua Nation. This news had shocked countless people, and the number of martial artists focusing on this list had been increasing over several hours, whose discussions had become increasingly exaggerated. There are only 30 people on the list. Wow, many martial artists I know at the Grand Master late stage are not on it. Lieutenant of the National Security Agency of Hong Kong is in 30th position. Why isn't Mu Feng in the Northwest on the list? Is this list authoritative? The list is made by the National Security Agency. Are you questioning its authority? Let's look up. Master Wu from Southwest China is on the list and ranked 23rd. Master Qi of Liumi City is ranked 22nd. They are all famous people. I see Wu Zilang from Shangjing, and he is ranked 15th. Wow, there are talents from the small world. Muxu is ranked 7th, it's relatively low for her. Shi Fengwu is ranked 6th and Yilong Yuan is ranked 5th. This ranking will make them fight. Perhaps Emperor King is 1st and North Tiger Gai Xing Kong is the 3rd. There is no doubt about it. Wait, why is Emperor King ranked 2nd? Who is 1st? A lot of people were staring at the screen. The list of dangerous people was automatically displayed from the 30th, and they couldn't control the scrolling of the screen, or they would have checked who was the most dangerous person immediately. To many people's surprise, Emperor King only ranked 2nd, which attracted protests from the martial arts world in the north of the Yangtze River. Emperor King has dominated an era with a lot of achievements. He has defeated countless famous powerful people, and even the talents from the small world recognize his strength and dare not challenge him. How can he be second? Under their nervous gazes, the name of the second person slowly glided down. Then they saw the first person's name. It was Zhang Han. Chapter 607, Disciples of the Wind Snow School. Now, the name Zhang Han contained magic. Other people's faces changed upon hearing it. Merciless Zhang. Many martial artists from the north didn't seem to take him seriously and commented, Zhang Han has just started his cultivation career half a year ago. His fighting record is far less impressive than Emperor King's. Yes, there must be something wrong with the rankings. I think Zhang Han could be ranked third at most. But there were also a lot of people arguing. Zhang Han killed Gedon Glai, who had reached the divine realm. A grandmaster that has killed a god state strong? I don't think Emperor King could ever do that. At the same time, those people from the north started to refute the rumors. What do you know? Gedon Glai had barely dabbled in the divine realm. We all know how difficult it is to control that kind of power for those who just make a breakthrough. He was barely a real god state strong. Gedon Glai was only marginally stronger than a grandmaster peak. And Emperor King has killed real Grandmaster Peak powerhouses before. But those talents from other worldlets, I don't think they would fall to the 5th, 6th, or 7th position. All of them could be ranked 4th, they are super powerful. However, most people in the martial arts world in the regions south of the Yangtze River supported this decision, especially those from Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Some of them were very excited to see what was happening. Merciless Zhang is from Hong Kong. He deserves to be number one in the world. He is the invincible Grandmaster, the most formidable power. The era of Emperor King has passed. Now, it's the era of Merciless Zhang. The era of Merciless Zhang has come. Many people were astonished when the rankings came out. Some people didn't buy it. There were quite a few people whose names were on the list who felt that their positions should be higher, which meant that they did care about this ranking list. There were quite a few people who were complacent because their family members were ranked high. There were also some that just didn't care. For example, Mugs, who was resting in the Tai Kai sword sect, scoffed at the news. How dare they put my name on that bullshit list, those idiots. At least they should put me in first place. Lots of people were trying to figure out the meaning behind the ranking list. They wondered why the list had come out now. The divination master Fang Rushan in Hong Kong had also heard the news. He stood in front of an old scholar tree in the yard of his house. He had been standing there for half an hour. Then he turned around and sighed to the young man behind him. Is my tea ready? Yes, uncle. Let's have some tea then, said Fang Rushan as he walked slowly to the side room of the house. Then he entered the door. The young man behind him could hear Fang Rushan murmuring, I'm afraid there will be a fight between Zhang Han and Emperor King sooner or later. As for Zhang Han, he was now sitting on a sofa. Xian and Meng were in a spa, singing a cheerful song. Zhang Han was playing with his cell phone in the hall on the 3rd floor. He had just received a few calls and was told about the astonishing ranking list, so he decided to take a look at it. Whose trick is this? Zhang Han thought to himself, and then he shook his head. The list came out with such weird timing. It first came out at 6 o'clock in the afternoon and went viral at 8 o'clock. There had to be someone behind it. The only people that could make the National Security Agency publicize the news were the high-level officials. Is it because somebody wants to see a fight between me and Emperor King? Zhang Han's eyes squinted slightly. He had a vague feeling that somebody ranked him first and Emperor King second for a purpose. Although he thought that there was nothing wrong with the ranking list, the vague feeling still bothered him a lot. Zhang Han had already met the 3 talents on the list from other worldlets. He had fought with them and looted their treasures, so all of them knew they were safe for now. Gaik Singkong had reached the divine realm and he was in Linhai to help. He had been keeping in touch with Zhang Han. Zhang Han wasn't clear about how other people were doing. Emperor King had made lots of achievements in his fighting records since he started cultivation, so Zhang Han felt confused about why someone would rank him first on the list, given his short cultivation period and limited record. Maybe that was because Zhang Han's latest fights were very horrifying, which made him well known to the world. After he considered it for a while, Zhang Han was sure that someone released the ranking list on purpose. And he was right. At the same time, somewhere on the border of China and Russia, Yi Tanlang looked in the direction of Shangjing. His clothes and hair looked messy. He smiled meaningfully. "Mr. Chen, before I leave, we should have some fun." A while later, in Shangjing City, it was the heart of Hua Nation and one of the most prosperous cities. 8 o'clock in the evening was always its busiest time. Somebody was in the corridor outside the Imperial Hall of the Dingsheng Club. Linji, the schoolgirl from Linhai City, and Ma Liang were walking to the Imperial Hall. A man in his early 30s was showing them the way. "Xiaoji, some high-ranking people will attend my elder brother's birthday party today. I'm taking you here today in the hope that you can seize the opportunity. But remember not to talk too much, listen more and talk less. Some of these people have a quite bad temper." The long-faced man in the front turned around and warned Linji. "I know that, Brother Kiao." Linji was very polite to the man he was looking at because the young man was Kiao, known as one of the foremost influential young men in Shangjing City. The four were known for being powerful and keeping a low profile. They were all born into noble families. Ordinary people simply couldn't have their outlooks, especially in Shangjing where social connections could be more than intertwined. The four young masters of Shangjing, including Linji and Liu Feng, were never simple-minded playboys. They thought twice before they made a move. Liu Ji was the most deep-minded and calculating one among the four. Sometimes they could be very aggressive. That depended on the person they met with or what other people said. They kept a low profile when they should, and they could be quite presumptuous when necessary. Now Linji looked calm and cautious. Kiao was going to take him to a circle of friends that was higher than the current one Linji was in. All members were of high social class. The Kiao clan used to be powerful because Kiao had an elder brother named Kiao Zhan. Kiao Zhan was the family's strong support. Linji once heard that Emperor King was a living legend in the martial arts world. His whole family counted on him. With his support, his family had grown even more potent than the Lin clan. Although the Lin family was also powerful, Linji was still too young. He needed to accumulate social resources by meeting different people. Being one of the four young masters in Shangjing wasn't his ultimate goal. He wanted to be one of the core leaders of the Lin clan. In his wildest dreams, he had even wanted to be the supreme leader of the whole clan. However, he still needed to work hard and keep calculating. The situation he was in was as complicated as a chess game. The winner would rule the city. Don't talk too much later, listen more and talk less, just like Kiao Fen told you. Linji warned Ma Liang before he entered the door. He turned around and looked at Ma Liang and the sexy girl standing beside him. "Okay, child Lin," the schoolgirl answered in low voice. "I know, Brother Lin," Ma Liang replied and nodded. Kiao took a look at them and went straight to the door. The two men standing on both sides of the door greeted him and opened the door for him. When they walked inside, they found the room was packed with people. There were about 40 to 50 people inside, of which about 30 were men and 10 were women. They were sitting on 3 round sofas. Kiao Zhan was sitting in the center, surrounded by dozens of people. They were chatting with each other. Linji checked Kiao Zhan from head to toe. The young man had a flat-top haircut. His eyes were narrow and long, with one single eyelid and one double eyelid. His lips were thick and his body was in good shape, maybe about 1.8 meters tall. Half of those people standing next to him were new to Linji. Those were once rich men who were famous in Shangjing City a few years ago. As they grew older, they hid from the public and started their own business, just like Linji. He looked to the two sides. It made Linji feel a lot more relaxed when he saw that the other people standing on both sides were not as influential as he was. However, when Lin Ji walked over, he was surprised to find someone sitting on the same sofa as Xiao Zhan. Zhang Chen is here too? Lin Ji narrowed his eyes slightly. Zhang Chen was the most outstanding disciple of the Zhang family. Last year, after returning from abroad, he had made a name for himself in Shangjing. Not long ago, Liu Feng had quarreled with him, but Zhang Chen made Liu Feng suffer a big loss. Zhang Chen had indeed grown much more powerful than ever. Zhang Han is much weaker than him. Only a person like him can be a worthy opponent of mine. Lin Ji looked at Zhang Chen meaningfully. Big brother, this is Lin Ji, a friend of mine, Xiao said to Xiao Zhan. Lin Ji quickly greeted Xiao Ji with cupped hands. Then he took out a box from his bag and handed it over, saying, Brother Xiao Zhan, happy birthday. I knew it's your birthday, but I wasn't sure what gift you'd like, so I assumed you'd like this jade slip from the Tang dynasty. I hope you like it. Other people's attention was caught by what Lin Ji was saying. Xiao Zhan casually picked up the gift. Thank you, child Lin. Please take a seat, Xiao. Be sure to serve them nicely. Okay. Xiao nodded and let Lin Ji and others sit on the sofa. A man in his 30s next to Xiao Zhan sipped a mouthful of red wine and said, So, I checked the ranking list carefully. It's so funny. I wonder which idiot made it. If Yi Danlang could hear those words, things would have gone out of control. It exists for a reason, Xiao Zhan said and frowned. This made quite a few people feel a little stressful. However, Xiao Zhan suddenly snorted and said, Emperor King is indeed the most powerful one. When he comes out of seclusion, he will let the whole world know that the ranking list was just a joke. After saying that, Xiao Zhan inadvertently withdrew the pressure he just gave out. The astonishing pressure dissipated. Obviously, he wasn't able to accept the ranking as calmly as he appeared to be. While Xiao Zhan was talking to them, the others listened carefully. Sometimes, the range of the subjects of their conversation could be very wide. By the way, Brother Zhan, another man suddenly said, a few days ago, I heard from my grandfather that a batch of disciples from the Wind Snow School branch of the Northern Yuan realm went to the Western world a few years ago, led by a supervisor. Nobody knew the exact number of their team members, but only dozens of them came back in the end. They are now coming to Shangjing. I'm afraid their arrival will bring turbulence. Chapter 608, Heavenly Strange Auction. You underestimate Shangjing City too much, Xiao sneered. They were merely some disciples from the Wind Snow School. The city will remain peaceful even if their protectors and elders come. Xiao thought about it for a moment and said, lots of people are involved in this. We shouldn't talk too much about it. Those people are at the top of the martial arts world, and we should avoid getting ourselves in trouble because of what we say. The man's expression froze when he heard this. He hastily explained, Understood, I was just curious. After all, they are from the Wind Snow School. Ha ha. Do you really think everyone in the Wind Snow School is powerful? Of course not. Xiao Zhan shook his head and said, Let's put it in this way. When Emperor King went to the Wind Snow School, he was one of the most talented disciples. Those people who came to Shangjing this time were just ordinary disciples. They were not as powerful as Shi Fenwu. They probably will go to meet with him first, or I don't think they can cause any stir in Shangjing city. What are they going to do in Shangjing? Several people asked curiously. They knew little about the upper class of the martial arts world. Xiao Zhan was different from them because he could contact with Emperor King. Therefore, Xiao Zhan knew more things than usual people did. However, though he knew many things, he wouldn't let them out at this moment. Xiao Zhan smiled peacefully. He picked up his wine glass and said, This piece of news was based on some speculation, and no one had drawn any conclusion on it. The only thing I can tell you is that those disciples from the Wind Snow School had been to England with Supervisor Wang. They've offended a local prince. The supervisor paid that price with his life and other people had to work as salves there for 6 years. They were back from the sufferings now, but I'm not sure what they are coming for, and even if I know their aim, I won't be allowed to tell that to you. Understood, Brother Zhan? Other martial artists nodded at each other and couldn't help but look at those people who were not cultivators. By saying we shouldn't talk too much about it, Xiao Zhan obviously was telling those ordinary people to talk less. However, what those martial artists didn't know was that Xiao Zhan was merely at the Grandmaster early stage, and it was common that there were lots of things he didn't know. By the way, I heard that Chen is going to take charge of the family's Lincoln trading? Asked a man sitting next to Xiao Zhan. Zhang Chen smiled and answered, "Thank you for asking. I'll soon be the president of the Lincoln trading. If you need any help by then, please tell me." Linji's gaze stopped for a few more seconds on this young man. Lincoln trading was a high-end enterprise. In the past, only the core member of Zhang clan could take charge of it. It seemed that this Zhang Chen was indeed talented. Congratulations, Brother Zhang Chen. Congratulations, Chen. The people around him all congratulated him, and even Linji greeted him with a smile because everyone knew what the position meant. Xiao Zhan looked at Zhang Chen with a different look and said, "Chen, you're now the president of the Lincoln trading. I guess it will take you less than 2 years to be a core member of your family. I'll keep my fingers crossed." Zhang Chen smiled and said, "Well, Zhang Chen is talented, indeed. Linji is also doing fine now." Xiao replied, "I heard that Linji is going to take over an enterprise from his family. It must be a promising one, isn't it?" "It's not like that, it's just..." Linji started his acting. He humbly told other people his recent performance. Then he looked at Xiao Zhan and said, "The annual auction of the Heavenly Strange auction will be started in 2 days. Brother Zhan, why don't you go there with me? You have to give me an opportunity to prove myself." This was already an obvious compliment, and Linji was trying his best. If Xiao Zhan bought that compliment, their relationship would soon be much closer. If he failed, other people would think that he was just trying to be polite. "I will go to the Heavenly Strange auction, but I'll go there with my family. Thank you for asking," Xiao Zhan answered casually. After they greeted each other, they started to chat again. Most of them were talking about the auction. The headquarters of the Heavenly Strange auction was in Shangjing City. Their business covered more than just antiques, but also all kinds of strange treasures. If they had a mysterious stone, they would price it like a gemstone. Sometimes, it could be natural precious material, and sometimes, it was just ordinary stones. They ran the auction like a gambling house. It was just that their business was 100% legal. Most frequenters were rich people who liked to collect antiques. The annual event would involve all the treasures the auction house had collected during the year, which made the auction quite appealing. The last auction at the end of last year broke many records with a 5 billion sales value. Therefore, many people couldn't wait to see what was going to happen this year. The event was only attractive to those who were really interested in it. Zhang Han, who had dedicated himself to Meng and Xian, had never paid attention to these things. But this time, he seemed to have run out of options. At noon the next day, Tang Jie and Fu Hongshan came to visit Zhang Han. They were leaving Hong Kong tomorrow for a vacation in Nepal. "This castle is really the most luxurious building I've ever seen. It's grand and elegant. I feel comfortable just by watching it. I envy you so much for living here," Hong Kita exclaimed when they ate hot pot in the restaurant on the 5th floor. "Auntie Tang, Uncle Hong, if you like it, you can stay here for a few more days," Xian said with a smile. "We already feel glad enough to be here, but we can't stay here long." Tang Jie shook her head with a smile and said, "We don't want to disturb your sweet time." Tang Jie gave her a hint as she was speaking. Those words made Xian blush. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know where to start. Fortunately, after Meng took a bite of the shrimp that Zhang Han peeled for her, she muttered, "My family is always sweet, super sweet." Her words made the adults laugh out loud. Just then, Zhang Han's cell phone rang. "I have to answer the call." After wiping his hands with a towel, Zhang Han turned around and walked out of the dining room. He sat down on the sofa near the window in the corridor and took out his phone. Then he saw a strange number from Shangjing. He answered the call and heard a woman's voice on the phone. Zhang Han Yang, do you know who I am? Anything wrong? Zhang Han asked. The voice on the phone was from Jiang Yanlan, the captain of the Vermilion Bird team. Her voice was low and soft like the low voice changer on the phone. Other people could easily recognize her. There's something about you that I wonder if you would like to hear? Jiang Yanlan was teasing him. Just tell me. You should say please tell me, or it sounds like I'm begging you for the opportunity to tell you about it. Jiang Yanlan snorted softly. Zhang Han felt it funny because she was actually begging him for the opportunity. Jiang Yanlan didn't keep him guessing. She stopped teasing him because it was the merciless Zhang that she was speaking to. Jiang Yanlan asked, I don't know if you've heard of the Heavenly Strange Auction. You've been in Shangjing for so many years, and I think you must have heard about it. Yes, I have. According to the schedule, the auction would start within days. Zhang Han had joined it several times before, so he knew the agenda clearly. This year's auction will start at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. The auction will be different this year, or at least it will be different for you, because there will be many more things present, including antiques and some memorable items like photos, diaries, etc. Jiang Yanlan sounded serious, and her voice turned even lighter. She then said slowly and anxiously, I told you this because that information was sent to me by your father, Zhang Wangyu. Your villa in Zhang Clan is now empty. What? Zhang Han hesitated for a second. His expression froze and soon he was outrageous. Those people robbed everything in his house and sent them to the auction for sale. Zhang Han felt it so eye-opening that these people could be so heartless. They emptied the house while his father and mother were still living there. Zhang Han wondered if it was because they were short of money or because they just resented the former patriarch living there. Zhang Han's mood was complicated this time. He was really upset, which was natural, and he was also very disappointed. When Zhang Wangyu assumed the patriarch of the family, the strength of the family had risen several times. How could they do this to him now? That might be the superficiality of human relationships. Zhang Han Yang, don't be impulsive. You should be patient. I'm telling you this so that you can get your mind prepared. This happened for a reason. I think it has something to do with those disciples from the Wind Snow School. We're still trying to figure it out, but at the same time, you should calm down and wait. Shangjing is no place to mess around. I'll get you informed as soon as we have new information. Jiang Yanlan reminded him hastily. It had been 2 seconds since she finished talking, but Zhang Han was still silent. Jiang Yanlan was rethinking if it was really a good idea to tell Zhang Han the news. But if she didn't tell him now, Zhang Han would be furious once he found it out by himself, which would lead to more severe consequences. Fortunately, Zhang Han's voice came out of the phone again soon enough. This time, his voice sounded lower and calmer. Thank you for telling me that. I don't want to hear any of their reasons. I'll go to the auction by myself. Zhang Han then hung up the phone and his facial expression became normal. Perhaps they did this for some reason, but no matter what the reason was, it was still hardly acceptable for Zhang Han. After sitting there for 10 seconds, Zhang Han stood up and returned to the restaurant. Back in the dining room, he grinned again, but Xian seemed to have detected the change of his mood. Soon it was late at night. Zhang Han was accompanying Meng by the bedside while Xian was half awake. She felt the other side of the bed empty now. She sat up and checked, only to find that Zhang Han wasn't in bed at this moment. She walked to the balcony barefooted and saw Zhang Han sitting on a chair, looking up at the moon in silence. Seeing Xian coming out, Zhang Han looked at her and smiled warmly. Xian licked her red lips and walked over. She then leaned her head on Zhang Han's shoulder and said softly, "What's the trouble? It's nothing to worry about, just some sentiments of mine." Zhang Han shook his head slightly and sighed. "The Zhang family is a place that carries my long-time memories. I love the place and those people, even if they have made mistakes or been cruel to the people I love. I can kill them by flipping my hand, but I'm afraid I won't be able to do that. Maybe I still have an emotional connection with them. Sometimes even I don't know what's inside the deepest of myself. Human relationships are so complicated. Chapter 609, Merciless Zhang was back in town. But I know you well. Xian rubbed her head against Zhang Han's neck. Her soft cheek was clinging to Zhang Han's skin. Then she whispered, "You are very gentle to me and Meng Meng. You don't even care much about other things. You're cold to your enemy. You can be masculine and gentle at the same time. Our relationship is destined, and I feel lucky to be with you. Meng Meng and I will always be happy as long as you're with us. We'll hold our wedding as long as you bring your parents home. We will live a happy life together forever." Ha! Zhang Han chuckled. "Of course, we'll be happy then, and that's just a small part of our ultimate goal. It's just. You're so excellent, which makes me feel like a trophy wife. I'm not sure if your parents will like me." Xian pouted and said, "That's impossible." Zhang Han laughed. "You're not a trophy wife. You've brought up Meng Meng so well, and you're a great star. You've also helped me to promote my cultivation level, which means our dream of a peaceful life will soon come true. People need to sail out of disturbance before they find peace. You and Meng Meng's safety always comes first to me. Well, I feel extremely safe as long as you're here with us, and by safe, I mean the security of this place. I don't know if there are any more risks. For example, there are temptations you can't resist. If you dare to submit to any of that, I'll go back to my parents' place and bring Meng Meng with me." Xian snorted and said. Upon hearing that, Zhang Han almost burst into laughter. Xian then moved her head so that she could cling to Zhang Han's body more comfortably. Then she asked, "Why are you upset? Is it because of Zhang Clan?" "Yes," Zhang Han nodded and answered, "they moved everything out of my parents' house, the furniture, antiques, and even photos. All of them will be auctioned in the Heavenly Strange auction tomorrow." Xian hesitated for a while. Then she pouted her lips and said, "They are way out of the line." "They surely are." Zhang Han nodded and looked at the sea in the distance. The moon was hiding in the clouds now, and the light was dim. The sea looked dark and depressed, but that brought no influence on Zhang Han. "Let's go to Shangjing City tomorrow," Zhang Han suddenly proposed softly. Xian nodded in Zhang Han's arms. Okay. She had a faint feeling that their trip to Shangjing City would cause a great disturbance. Shangjing City used to be Zhang Han's home field until he was forced to leave. Now that he had to go back, those people who had looked down upon him, schemed him, and plotted against him should be prepared to pay the price. Xian was also thinking to herself, "Anyone who made my husband unhappy and who had bullied him will pay a heavy price." A few seconds later, Zhang Han smiled as he saw Xian move her arms. He then carried Xian in his arms and went back to their bedroom. They fell asleep in each other's arms. Around 6 o'clock the next morning, when Zhang Han got up to prepare breakfast, he called Xiao Feng. "Xiao Feng, prepare for our trip to Shangjing this time, and be sure to bring more money." Xiao Feng's facial expression froze when he heard what Zhang Han said. Whoosh! He hastily got up from his bed, completely awake. His eyes gradually opened as those words echoed in his mind. "This morning, Shangjing? Prepare more money? Something must have happened. The merciless Zhang will be back in Shangjing? The show is on." Zhang Feng wore a mysterious smile. He was weaker than now last time he went there, but he still had beat Lin Ji, Zhang Yuan, and other people because he had made a lot of preparations for it. But now, he was already a Wudao Grand Master. The 5 generals of the security team and Leng had all advanced into the Grand Master realm. There were 6 Grand Masters and nearly 100 Heaven Stage and Earth Stage Masters in this team. He thought the team was powerful enough, so this time, they wouldn't need as many followers as last time. He could deal with small-scale fights and disturbances. And as to those real powerhouses, his master would help him. Zhao Feng quickly picked up his cell phone and dialed a number. Yong, get the company's working capital prepared and book the tickets of a flight at 8 o'clock to Shangjing. Is our boss going to Shangjing? The man on the phone seemed surprised. Yes, Zhao Feng replied. I don't know exactly what it is now, just get ready first. I want to go with you this time, said Xuyong after some hesitation. We don't have many things to do in the company recently. I can let Instructor Liu take my shift when I'm off. Zhao Feng thought about it for a moment and agreed. Okay, I'll tell him about it. After that, he hung up the phone. Then he dialed Instructor Liu's number and told him the situation. The man on the phone exclaimed, "What did you say? You two little bastards, how dare you go out for fun and leave me in the camp? I took such good care of you before, and now you've left that behind, you ungrateful brats." Zhao Feng felt so embarrassed. The man talked as if Zhao Feng had abandoned him, so Zhao Feng replied annoyedly, "That's enough, you can go with us." "That's right, then I'll get up and wait for you in the company," Instructor Liu answered joyfully and immediately hung up the phone. He knew very well what would happen when Zhang Han returned to Shangjing, especially after the release of the ranking list. He was a sensitive man, and he had the hunch that his boss would inevitably end up in a fight with Emperor King, which would be a collision between the most powerful young men from the south and the north. Would Emperor King's rule continue, or would it be the end? He couldn't wait to see it. Moreover, the members of the security team knew why Zhang Han had to leave Shangjing. They didn't understand why Zhang Han chose to return now, but they knew the return of Zhang Han would shake the martial art world of Shangjing. The news of Zhang Han's return gradually spread in Shangjing city. Zhang Han's family got themselves dressed and had some breakfast. Then they walked to the first floor and saw a huddle of men standing beside the parterre on the small square. Wang Zanping, Wang Zanzong, Wang Zanhong, Wang Ming, Rong Jiaxin, Zhao Feng, and other people were standing there chatting. There were at least 20 of them. Seeing Zhang Han and his family coming out, all of them turned around and greeted them. "You." Zhang Han looked at them and asked, "Are you all going with us?" "Of course, Shangjing is a dangerous place, Han, I don't think you can keep them safe alone," Wang Zanping said in a low voice, "and you are not alone now." "Yes, it will be safer if you have our company." "Very well." Finally, Zhang Han nodded his head. Wang Zanping thought for a while and tell Wang Zanhong to stay so that the restaurant could be managed. Other people walked down the hill. They got in their car and followed the panda car to the company. When he arrived at the company, Zhang Han saw Zhang Li, Zif, Xuyong, and even Tanan. This guy didn't care much about ruling Hong Kong, and he was happy to hang out with Zhang Han. He was here this time mainly because he knew there would be a fight between Zhang Han and Emperor King. He wanted to see the fight by himself. Moreover, Tanan wanted to help Zhang Han by helping his beloved ones, like Xian and Meng Meng. Finally, at 8 o'clock in the morning, a private jet landed on the airport behind Meng Meng Group. Zhang Han's family, Wang Zanping, Wang Zanzong, Wang Ming, Zhao Feng, Xuyong, Elder Meng, Instructor Liu, Leng Yi, and Tanan. There were 9 Wu Dao Grandmasters in total, except for Zhang Han. Gradually, there had been a significant change of Zhang Han's followers' power. 20 people got on the private jet, including Zhang Li and Zif. Soon, the engine started and the private jet rose into the sky. The stewardess on the plane pushed the drink cart and walked around to distribute drinks to everyone. Meng Meng ordered some juice and sat by the window. She looked so thrilled. The family was going out to hang out together again. After 3 hours' flight, the private jet finally landed at the Shangjing International Airport. Although Xuyong had just been informed of the trip in the morning, he arranged the trip perfectly in a very short time. As soon as they got off the plane, they saw 10 black Rolls-Royce Phantoms waiting there. There was nobody else in those cars. A man in a black suit was standing in front of the cars respectfully. Zhang Han and the other people walked to the cars, and Xuyong walked to the man. He raised his right hand to greet the man in the suit. "Hello, Mr. Wang, I'm Xuyong." "Hello, Mr. Xu, here are the keys to those cars, just call me when you don't need them anymore." The man quickly shook hands with Xuyong and explained the tips. He was one of Liu Qingfeng's subordinates. Liu Fengqing had thousands of helpers all over the country, many of which were in big cities, so it was more than easy for him to arrange some cars for Zhang Han. Xuyong knew this clearly, so he called Liu Qingfeng without hesitation in the morning. They didn't need any drivers, because the members of the security group could drive. After the greeting, Xuyong got in the first car and drove it out of the airport. An hour later, they checked into the Dongfeng Hotel on North 3rd Ring Road, which was the most luxurious hotel in this block. The presidential suite cost 160,000 yuan a day, and they booked 7 suites, each shared by 2 or 3 people. When they arrived at the hotel and finished lunch in the restaurant, it was almost 1 o'clock. They split up and went back to their own suites. "Papa, when are we going out to have fun?" asked Meng, who was sitting on the sofa next to Zhang Han. There were other people in Zhang Han's suite waiting for a discussion. It won't be long. Before Zhang Han finished speaking, Xian interrupted him with a smile. "How about tomorrow? We need to have some rest today. It's already in the afternoon now and it will soon be dark outside. Papa still has things to do. How about we watch cartoons here and wait for him to come back?" Meng seemed surprised. She raised her head to look at Xian and Zhang Han. She seemed to have other ideas in her mind. Xian lowered her head and whispered something to Meng. Meng then nodded her head. Okay, Papa, Mama and I will wait for you to come back, but don't you leave us waiting for too long." "Very well," Zhang Han replied and nodded. Then he stood up and looked at Wang Zanping and the others. "I'll stay," Wang Zanping said. He had read Zhang Han's mind through. "I'll stay here as well, I don't want to spoil your fun," Wang Zanzong said with a smile. Everyone knew that they didn't need to worry about Zhang Han's safety. They'd better stay here to protect Xian and Meng. Moreover, they didn't have much interest in the auction. "Then we won't go either," said Wang Ming and Rong Jiaxin. Most of them chose to stay. "I'll go." Instructor Liu raised his hand. He said with a smug smile on his face, "Boss, I'll go with you." His words made Zhang Han laugh. In the end, only Zhao Feng, Xuyong, Zhang Li, Instructor Liu, and Ltanan had joined Zhang Han's trip to the auction. It was almost time. They were ready to go out. Before they left, Xian stood in front of Zhang Han. She gently tidied Zhang Han's collar and whispered with a smile, "You're so handsome, just follow your own will." She knew that with her and Meng around, Zhang Han would restrain himself from making troubles, but now she didn't want him to do that. Since he had returned to Shangjing, it was time to tell those who made him suffer in the past that the merciless Zhang was back in town. "That's great." Zhang Han looked at Xian and laughed. He reached out to touch her fair cheeks and rubbed Meng's head. Then he left the suite with others. The moment he walked out of the door, those people could feel that the boss was no longer who he used to be. They wondered if that was an indication of a change in the situation of Shangjiang City. Chapter 610, A Meeting of Young Masters. The president of the Heavenly Strange Auction was also in charge of 10 more influential companies. He was a mysterious man. Everyone knew he was a martial artist, but few had met him in person. The auction was just a little hobby of his. He loved to collect antiques and treasures. He would admire those things for days and then sell them out. That was why the auction was held every year. At first, besides his business partners, there were few people that were interested in the action. However, those natural precious materials and rare antiques in the first year's auction made the auction famous throughout the world. In the second year, more rich people attended the auction. As time went by, nowadays, many financial groups sent experts to the Heavenly Strange Auction. More attendees brought more security issues. There were also 2 incidents in the Heavenly Strange Auction. Once a rich man from North America spent 500 million on a big tripod, but as soon as he walked 1 mile away from the auction center, the tripod was robbed by assassinators from the Killing Star mercenary. Those people retreated in a planned route. Just when the rich man was so worried, the tripod was brought back along with pictures of those assassinators' bodies littering everywhere in the wild. There were also once when an Earth stage master robbed a local rich man of the natural precious materials he bid for. The master took them away, but it didn't take long before he sent them back with his forehead sweating. These were 2 stories that had been known by many people. There were many other things that ordinary people had no access to. Many of them happened outside Shangjing City. The Heavenly Strange Auction had a rule that they would protect the buyer's safety in Shangjing, which indicated how proud and powerful they were. The auction house was on the 23rd floor of the Heavenly Strange Auction building. As the door of the elevator opened, a large round hall was exposed to the participants. On both sides of the hall, there were several sofas and tea tables. On the wall standing across the hall, there was a grand gate behind which there was a big auction hall. The auction hall was also in a round shape. The central part was lower and was for the ordinary guests. On both sides of the hall, there were higher platforms for VIPs. There were 15 private chambers in total. In front of the hall, there was a wide stage with a big screen on it. The host of the auction had a spot on the stage and a computer to control the screen. On the left side of the stage was the trading area. More than 10 people were sitting on a row of chairs. There were already lots of people in the auction hall at this moment. These people were very quiet, and even when they were talking to each other, they whispered. Most participants were still standing outside the hall in huddles, chatting with each other. Some of them were young and some were old. Zhang Yuan and Zhang Chen were now chatting with 2 other people. Brother Chen, this is the first time you've ever participated in this auction, Zhang Yuan said, and his eyes were wandering on those pretty girls in colorful costumes. Then he continued, it's my first time to see so many people joining the event today. I could see the intense competition coming. It's second master's birthday today and I want to bid for an antique. Given this situation, I'm afraid I don't have enough money with me. But Brother Chen, I think you stand a high chance to make a bid for a nice antique. He was implying that he wanted Zhang Chen to back him up. His pocket money was limited, and he still wanted to save some for daily use. However, Zhang Chen didn't seem to have realized it. He looked as calm as usual and replied, it is your love and respect that matter. The gift itself isn't that important. You're right, Zhang Yuan scratched his head and replied with a smile. Inside, he thought to himself that he would wait to see if Zhang Chen would bid for a cheap gift. Among those young people, Zhang Chen was the most distinguished one. On the other side of the hall, there were 2 elder men, but they didn't share the same topic with those young men. Moreover, it was impossible for Zhang Yuan to ask them for money. There aren't as many beautiful women here as last year. I remember 2 years ago, all the women here dressed themselves up and they looked stunning, Zhang Yuan said and scanned all women in the hall. Zhang Chen shook his head. Zhang Yuan was a typical playboy. Even Zhang Han made his own name known for being one of the 4 most talented young masters. Although Zhang Han later got himself in trouble because of his arrogance, the sense of propriety always mattered most. After Zhang Chen returned to Zhang Clan, he didn't see many outstanding young men among the youths. There were several of them that were talented, but all of them were too naive. I'll go over there and say hello to Mr. Wang, Zhang Chen said and left immediately when he saw someone on the other side of the hall. Zhang Yuan and the other 2 were left behind. That's no fun. Zhang Yuan looked at the other 2 people and muttered, they have enough chances to chat with each other at ordinary times. Why do they have to do it right here and right now? The point is that their conversations are meaningless. I'll be fine with it if they've reached a few agreements, but nothing has been achieved so far. Hey, Mr. Liu Feng is here. A short man noticed the other 2 as soon as he saw Liu Feng. He would bring his brothers with him wherever he went. That guy is rich, Zhang Yuan snorted and said. He booked a private chamber, and he surely has to bring his brothers here to enrich their experience. The two girls around him are quite hot, said the yellow-haired man, who couldn't move his eyes away from them. While they were watching, Liu Feng walked to the elders of Liu clan with his brothers and the two beautiful women. The proud man appeared to be very polite to the elders. After that, he walked to the other side of the hall and chatted with a few friends. Damn, I'll bring two beautiful women with me next time. Zhang Yuan curled his lips and said as he looked at Liu Feng from the corner of his eye. Then he paused for a second and said, Linji's here. Is that Kiaof next to him? The shorter guy asked. He's the most influential young master in Shangjing City. Not just Kiaof. The yellow-haired man looked serious and introduced in a low voice, see the man leading all of them now? That's Kiao Zhan. He's Kiaof's brother, a living legend. Haha, if it weren't for him, how could Kiaof become the most talented young master? Zhang Yuan sneered in a low voice. Kiao Zhan was standing there with Kiaof and Linji standing next to him, followed by other 5 people. Their team caught the eyes of many people in the hall. Zhang Yuan was smiling outwards but felt envious inwards. Many people greeted Kiao Zhan warmly while they passed by him in the hall. Kiao Zhan is here. Brother Zhan. Mr. Kiao. They called him in many ways, but no one dared to call him Kiao or Zhan because they were not qualified. No one could call the Wudao Grandmaster only by his first name or given name. Moreover, Kiao Zhan had Emperor King behind his back, which made him more formidable. Besides Zhang Yuan, Zhang Chen also looked weird this time. There was an imperceptible sneer on his face. He was surprised to see that Linji had made such a quick move. It turned out that Linji had some hidden talents. Zhang Chen wanted to cozy up to Kiao Zhan, but he didn't know exactly what he could do. Linji's plan was much easier to carry out with Kiaof's help. That was part of the resource he had been accumulating for all these years. He's really a formidable opponent. Zhang Chen sighed. Deep inside, the social circle in Shangjing was like a chess game, and it was a little late for him to join it now. But isn't that funnier? Zhang Chen looked at Linji calmly, and he was surprised to find that Linji was looking at him, too. They looked into each other's eyes for a short moment and then moved their eyes away. On Kiao Zhan's way to the auction hall, he never greeted anyone except those who greeted him first. They strode into the auction hall under everybody's gaze. In fact, those who were chatting and laughing outside were not of high social position or status. The real bigwigs were already sitting inside the private chambers in the auction hall. After Kiao Zhan and the others left, the voices in the auction house became loud again. Liu Feng and Zhang Chen could be Kiaof's match, but the gap between them and Kiao Zhan was too huge. Everybody thought that Kiao Zhan could be the last and the most important guest today because it was already 1:50 p.m. and there were only 10 minutes before the auction began. They wanted to spend another 5 minutes chatting before they went into the auction hall. 2 minutes later, another group of people walked out of the elevator. The leading one was a middle-aged man in a black suit. He looked very cautious. He turned his body slightly and checked the one behind him. Obviously, he was showing the way to the people coming next. There were 5 people behind him, a young man with short hair and a calm, cold face. He was wearing white sneakers, a pair of dark blue jeans, and a black windbreaker. He looked like a young entrepreneur with a vigorous girl by his side. Behind him, another man was wearing a grim face. He might be a bodyguard. There was another man standing next to him that was smiling and scanning everybody in the hall. The last one was a burly middle-aged man. Many people lost their interest as soon as they saw their faces. They didn't know any of those people. However, there were a few people who fixed their eyes on them for 2 more seconds, and suddenly they seemed so interested. They look like the 2 kids kicked out by Zhang clan, Zhang Han and Zhang Li. Having heard the whispers of the people around him, Zhang Chen hesitated for a while and looked at the 2. Many people approached the group of people to take a closer look, so Zhang Chen could only saw those people's backs when he was trying to figure it out. He was wondering if it was really Zhang Han. Zhang Yuan, who was standing at the door, opening his eyes wide. Damn it. He couldn't move his eyes away from Zhao Feng because he recognized this was the guy beating him last time. How dare he come back to Shangjing City? Wait, why are Zhang Han and Zhang Li here? Just when the group of people was about to enter the gate of the auction hall, Zhang Yuan caught up with them. Zhang Han? Zhang Yuan called out as he walked over. The group of people stopped to look at him. Zhang Yuan recognized Zhang Han as soon as he saw the familiar face. He checked Zhang Han from head to toe and said, "You look great. Are you back in Shangjing to celebrate Second Master's birthday? It's a pity that you aren't able to pass the gate of Zhang clan." That was what was in Zhang Yuan's mind, which he didn't speak out. Anything wrong? Zhang Li frowned and asked coldly. Nothing, I just want to say hello. Zhang Yuan gave a smile and looked at Zhao Feng. Then he said arrogantly, "But I also want to remind you that you'd better stay away from him. Because he has a grudge with me." Before he could finish his words, Zhang Han moved his eyes away from him and continued to step forward. Zhao Feng glanced at him coldly and followed Zhang Han closely. Instructor Liu glared at him fiercely and uttered only one word, "Idiot."